Well, good morning to all of you. And today I want to talk about the need to have a high priest in your life. You know, it seems so foreign to us because the high priest seems so old covenant. You think, when we think about a high priest, either it's old covenant or you think it's something to do with the occult. But we wanted to talk about a high priest, and we want to talk about Jesus, who is indeed our high priest, and how that impacts our life. And we might ask ourselves a couple of questions. Do you think that we might have need of a high priest? And from that context, we might want to launch into the question of, what does a high priest do? What did he do, for example, for the children of Israel? Well, we know that he offered sacrifices on their behalf. We know that he went into the Holy of Holies once a year to offer that. He was their religious head for the nation of Israel. And that he was appointed originally, God did the appointing, told Moses that of Levites, and then they got the high priest. But historically, you'll realize that as you march through time, the high priest wasn't, that didn't happen. They bought the office, they murdered for the office, they got very, very political in terms of the high priest. And the high priest wasn't the humblest of people. In fact, you know, with all the garb and they had, basically for our modern day, if you can't think, it would be like the Pope. I mean, you got a mitre, you got a cape, I want to call it the shawl, you know, the robe that you have the staff, you had all of the trappings of the high priest, and you had great honor among the people when the high priest came in the presence. So that's kind of the visual for us, that's kind of the history for us in very, very short term. But I'd like to read about the high priest as defined by the book of Hebrews, the author of the book of Hebrews, that tells us about our high priest. And this is a concluding kind of statement, therefore, as a result. Since we have a great high priest who has gone through the heavens, Jesus the Son of Man, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet without sin. Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. The way the King James Version puts it, you know, we don't have a high priest that cannot be touched with our feelings of infirmities. And I think there's some lessons for us all to learn, to understand, and things that we can apply to our everyday life and understanding what a high priest is all about that'll help us today. As I say, when we look in the contrast of the Old Testament, up until Jesus' day, the high priest there, the robes, the attire, the pomp, the authority that they had, the division between the high priest and ordinary, you know, because he was, quote, a holy man, a man of God, the adoration of the office itself. And we've talked about the intrigue, the purchasing of the offices and all of that. And so the question for us, though, is, does Jesus, as our high priest, make a difference? Do we even think about him in terms of being a high priest and what a high priest does? Well, I think here when we read here in Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 14, we find that Jesus is identified as a great high priest who has passed into the heavens. I know of no physical high priest who did that. We see a high priest, and actually we have the example of that in the book of Acts where he ascended on high. We also have the example immediately after the resurrection when Mary and the other women came and he said, you know, don't touch me yet because I am not yet ascended to the Father. But it's kind of in that immediacy, though, that they do touch him and all of that. Now, it isn't because Jesus is untouchable as a high priest. Not at all. But he had to, first of all, ascend to his Father to be accepted of his Father as an offering that he was. And then, again, they did touch him and the like. But let's take a look at what this is telling us in terms of having a high priest, the result. The result of this it was when we read in verse 14, is that we have this high priest. Since we have a great high priest who's gone through the heavens, let us hold firmly to the faith that we profess. And I think it's important to recognize that in our day and age, to hold firmly to the faith, the trust, the confidence that we have in Jesus as our high priest. That faith, that confidence is very important for us all. And that we are also called to a profession. In fact, that, as we shall see, should be our primary profession. That is the work that we do, who we are. We talk about the number one thing that who we are is that we are Christians. As Christ defines Christians. As Jesus would have us be Christians. Not as we sometimes falter and fail in that regard, but as He would call us Christians and as He would have us to live. So we need to understand a couple of things, and we'll want to, in order for us to understand that, let's back up just a little bit in the book of Hebrews to Hebrews chapter 3 and verse 1. Therefore, notice here again this relationship that we find that we have, and the way what this is called. Holy brothers who share in a heavenly calling. Fix your thoughts on Jesus, the apostle and high priest, whom we confess. This is our confession, that He indeed is the apostle of God. He is the one sent from God. He is the high priest from God. And that our calling is not a simple career calling, so to speak, a job that we have in this life only, a secular job, but rather our calling, brethren, is a heavenly calling. And that doesn't change. That doesn't change through time. That doesn't change in circumstances. You know, because some days our circumstances that we might look at them are really good. And other days they appear to be less than good. And when we're sitting in the Dallas airport and we're waiting for a plane to leave that leaves hours after our car, you know, in that moment in time we think, whoa, you know, this isn't good. But then when we find the car and somebody else is waiting for us, it's like, why did I doubt? God, you took care. But I would say that in the Dallas, we doubt. And in the plane, and we think, and not only do we doubt, we tend to get a little aggravated. And then we begin to try to figure out everybody else's problems. Well, what are we going to do? And what are they going to think? And how's all this going to turn out? And, you know, the irritants that as human beings that we might tend to have. And the things that we might think and the attitudes that might crop up. But we do profess that Jesus is our high priest. He is faithful to the one who appointed Him, just as Moses was faithful in all God's house. Jesus has been found worthy of greater honor than Moses, just as the builder of the house has greater honor than the house itself. For every house is built by someone, but God is the builder of everything. Moses was faithful as a servant in all God's house, testifying to what would be said in the future. But Christ is faithful as a son over God's house. And we are His house if we hold on to our courage and hope of which we boast. Now here in this high priest we find not only do we have a heavenly calling, but we also have an ultimate profession that is above all other professions. Then we also have a faithful high priest, and we are a house built by God.
The Worldwide Church of God in Fairfield, Santa Rosa, and Modesto are located in the San Francisco Bay Area, regarded as the most prosperous region in the United States. We believe Jesus Christ when He proclaimed in Matthew 6:24 that serving God is more important than serving mammon. We welcome everyone to come and worship and fellowship every Saturday at the times listed on your screen and on our website, worldwidechurchofgod.com.